Nerdy Sports Fan here with your Thursday Night Football breakdown. Well, this was nowhere near as good of a game as I assumed it was going to be. If you keep up with my pregame videos, you'd know that I felt that this game was going to be a lot closer than the national media believed. Cam Newton let me down. Man, that guy was off target at times, but most of the problem was the offensive line would break down before he released the ball. Half of that's on the line, half of that's on just him holding the ball too long. Now, Norv Turner had this offense clicking earlier on. In the past few games, there was a lot of pace to this offense that just didn't come out in this game. And after a pick six and a couple of scores, then you're out of your game plan, and games like this happen. Pittsburgh dominated from start to finish. Now, there's a couple of things to think about in that dominance. Roethlisberger was good as always. Antonio Brown, Smith-Schuster, they got their looks. James Conner was getting rested during the game and seems to have gotten dinged up somehow. Possibly concussion-like symptoms, because it didn't seem like he hurt his arms or legs or chest or anything of that nature. And after going into the tent for a brief period of time, coming back in, you saw him talking to Coach Tomlin on the sideline and then going to the locker room before the end of the game. Well before the end of the game. Now I know Roethlisberger and other starters got pulled as well because they were just so far ahead, but Connor's the only one that went into the locker room. So it's a little troubling, especially if you're a fantasy football owner of Connor, like I am. Might want to start hovering around Samuel and see if there is an injury to Connor. I'm really not expecting Le'Veon Bell to be a factor for this team, at least for a couple more weeks. Even if he does sign by that deadline, he's going to be an inactive next week, I'm sure. And maybe we'll need a week or two of play and practice to really get into game shape. So, we're talking playoff time for fantasy football owners for Bell at best. I don't really even expect him to be a factor the remainder of the season. Connor is worrying. If you are a fantasy owner, check out Samuel, hover around him. He seems to be the one who is carrying the ball more frequently than the other running back right on the roster. Outside of that, Vance McDonald seems to have put things together with Roethlisberger. Now, this offense is far too good to not have a tight end that actively contributes. I don't understand why it hasn't been a thing for them really to this point in the season. But you saw Vance McDonald come alive in this game. He's only really had one other game where he's done that, so I wouldn't expect it to be extremely consistent. But he is only owned by about half the leagues out there, and if you're desperate for tight end, which a lot of people are because it's a bad year for that position, he's available for a lot of people. And if this is leading to a trend, then you're going to have somebody for the stretch run and for the playoffs that'll serve you well. So check him out, pick him up if you're weak in the tight end position. The Pittsburgh defense seems to be coming alive. Earlier in the year, they couldn't stop anyone. And, really, they got after Cam Newton early and often. They were taking advantage of the poor offensive line play and Cam Newton holding onto the ball way too long. And you saw Watt get in there for some sacks. You saw other players contributing as well. But Watt was very obviously the most dominant player on that Pittsburgh defensive front in this game, at least. And they had some special teams turnovers as well. And it was a very, very good game for the Pittsburgh defense. They seemed to be coming together. That talk early in the season of Mike Tomlin losing the locker room, surrounding all that drama from Bell and Antonio Brown mouthing off. Now everybody's shut up. They're 6-2-1. The only teams in the AFC that you can really say are better than them are the Chiefs and the Patriots. And by the end of the year, that might be more debatable. So it's going to be interesting the rest of the year. Pittsburgh is very, very much a strong playoff contender. For the other side, Carolina, they could have used this win. I mean, the NFC is a lot deeper than the AFC is, and Carolina's good. They really are. They're going to go to the playoffs, I'm sure. But they really can't compete with the upper echelon NFC teams and AFC teams, obviously. The New Orleans Saints and the Rams have them clearly outclassed. And their team's probably one good draft class with some maybe help on the line or another offensive skill position away from competing consistently with the class of the NFC. So this was kind of boring in the second half because of the score being so lopsided, but if you are a fantasy football owner, there was things to really pay attention to late in the game. I always suggest watching the games as you can. You get a little more insight than just tracking the numbers with Yahoo or ESPN or NFL, whichever service you use for your fantasy leagues. There's a translation loss there. And Vance McDonald shows really well, but he's not consistent. But pick him up if you're desperate. Again, this was a fun one. If you like the content, please like and subscribe. Check out my other videos for the pre-games to get my opinions on what's going to be coming up, especially for fantasy. And follow me on Instagram at The Nerdy Sports Fan. Get my weekly fantasy football pickup of the week. That's it for me. We'll see you next week, guys.